pleasure to introduce award-winning author Charlie Jane Anders in celebration. Oh, I should have that larger so I can actually read. In celebration of Victories Greater Than Death, the first book in a new, thrilling young adult sci-fi adventure series set against an intergalactic war. Joining Charlie Jane in conversation tonight is best-selling author Holly Black. Charlie, congratulations and happy book birthday. Holly, I'll pass it off to you. Thank you.
Hello. You look beautiful.
You look amazing. I think the silver hair looks just so lovely on you. I just love that.
Thank you. So, all right. First of all, I want to say how much I absolutely love Victories Greater Than Death. I love Tina and Rachel and Elsa and all their genius friends. I love the people they meet on their journey. I feel as though you have created an enemy with one of the most terrifying powers I have ever read. Full stop. This haunts me. And I have been talking for years about wanting an honest to goodness space opera for YA. And I feel like finally, this is the book I've been hoping for. So to start us off, would you read us a little bit from it?
Yeah, so I'm just going to read for 3 minutes. And this is basically just right when Tina and her best friend Rachel have just gotten on a space elevator. They're gotten on basically a flying pizza dish, and they're leaving the Earth. They're flying up into space for the first time. And I'm just going to read a page. As we shoot upward, the world gets bigger and wider, and somehow I feel bigger too. The town where I've lived my whole life shrinks until every landmark smushes together. Rachel sits down and hugs herself, taking short, shallow breaths. I pull myself down into a sitting position too because it feels safer because there's no railing on this elevator. Now Yato the Mantha, our guide, towers over both of us more than ever. I turn my phone back on, and there are a million texts from my mom, mostly asking if I'm still alive or if some aliens have killed me. I call her, and she picks up immediately. I blurt out, "Mom, I'm okay. They came after us, but we got away and we got rescued, and now we're on our way up to their spaceship." Rachel's talking on her phone, too. We're both down to one notch of signal, almost out of range. My mom is saying something in a crinkly voice that sounds like, "I'll always love... Just remember, you don't need a spaceship to be... I love you, Mom." Then I realize the call dropped. My phone has zero signal, even roaming, gone. Rachel stares at her phone, shivering, wide-eyed. She sobs without making a sound, and I'm sniffling into my sleeve, too. The ground is a blur of colors. I'm probably never going to see my mom again. Plus, I keep imagining this platform is going to lose whatever holds it up, and we're going to plummet tens of thousands of feet. Every time I look down, I breathe fast and shallow again. "Can I hug you?" Rachel whispers. I nod, and then she and I are wrapped in each other, both of us shaking and letting out gouts of tears. Yato the Mantha kneels and touches my foot with one giant yellow and blue hand. "I know how hard this must be. I had to leave home when I was very young, but very soon you'll reclaim your true identity and you'll understand why this was all necessary." I think I'll stop there. Yay.
Okay, so I got a question. This is going to take a long wind up, though. I'm going to wind up. It's going to take me a minute. So first of all, we just had an amazing review in the New York Times. Amal wrote, and so I'm going to read a little bit of what Amal wrote. "Victories Greater Than Death will refresh and rehydrate you." Funny, tender, vivacious. It focuses on saving the universe by making friends and fighting fascists. Amazing. The whole thing is a perfect description, but also just really fun. So Tina is a clone of a lost tactician and has kind of an impossible legacy to live up to. And one thing I thought about when I was reading this was the idea of reincarnation, the idea we might learn from our past lives. And although there's a lot that Captain Argentian knew, it seems to me that Tina learned some things that maybe Captain Argentian never learned. And in terms of saving the universe by making friends, can you talk about a little bit about the destined hero versus the found family?
Yeah, I mean, these are things that I'm super obsessed with, obviously. And like I love stories of people trying to claim a heroic mantle. And like, like there have been 20 other people who've been Batman who are all like, can I live up to the legacy of Bruce Wayne or whatever? And that's a huge theme in a lot of heroic stories. And I feel like for Tina, it's really just like that she both wants to be this kind of amazing thing and kind of be important and special the way that we all do. But also she really does want to make a difference. Like this is why when she's on Earth, she's like organizing all these weird pranks against like creeps and bullies because she just can't not do something when she sees injustice. So it's both. And they're all tangled up together. And even she doesn't really know where the line between those two things is exactly. Like the line between wanting to do good and wanting people to think that you're special and important in the center of the universe. But I think that her arc over the course of this book is definitely one from like she's the hero who's going to save everybody, and like whenever they're in a bad situation she's like, I'll protect you, get behind me, you should stay behind, I'll go, to like we should all do this together because we're all stronger together. And like rather than me being like the hero and you're all being my sidekicks, we're all heroes together. And I think that is a thing that's really important to me. And I wrote about this actually today on the Mary Sue. I think it's a really important thing that we kind of move away or move beyond that kind of like chosen hero thing. And I loved actually while I was working on this book, I had not watched any Steven Universe before I started working on this book. Like I'd seen one episode and I was like, oh, it's about a kid who likes cat ice cream things. And that was all I knew. Like he likes cat face ice cream things, cookie cat. But I had not seen much of Steven Universe until actually Amal talked about it at WisCon. And then I was like, okay, I better go watch this show. And, that show does a really good job of like this kid who is struggling with a heroic legacy, kind of similar to Tina. And then eventually over time, Stephen realizes that he's better with Connie by his side and that he should be part of like a whole, like in the final like Steven Universe feature, there's just like a ton of people who are all heroic and all part of the same like heroic family and all doing great stuff together. And it's no longer like this one kid is going to save everybody. And I think that that's like the progression that was in the back of my mind. And, even though I had come up with this idea before I saw Steven Universe, it was definitely a huge influence of how I like ended up executing, I think, the concept.
It's funny, actually hearing you talk about that, I'm struck by thinking about the way that being a writer is often poised. Like it's often poised as a super solitary act, but to me, like it's about a community and it's about having a community of writers. Like I never even thought about it before, but when you're saying that, I was like, yeah, we're always sort of thought of as, a loner in a cabin. But like the reality of it is I don't think I could do this job without my writer friends who, come in and save me from myself.
For sure. And I think that there's two parts to that. One is like, I'm always, whenever people are like, what's your advice for new writers? What's your advice for young writers who are starting out? My advice is always find community, find friends, find a writing group, find people who you can share your work with. Even if your work isn't getting published yet, share it with your friends, share it on Wattpad or Scribd or, AO3 or whatever. Share it with people. Have a community because you're not going to be able to get through this. You're not going to be able to keep doing this if you do it on your own. And the other thing is I feel like we often kind of do single out like one author and like, this is the author that we're all going to like. And like, especially for marginalized people, it's really bad when you have like one member of a community is like singled out as like, this is the kind of member of this marginalized community that we're all going to like put all of our stuff onto. And they're going to be like the one person we're going to hold up from that community. Whereas usually anytime there's one person doing amazing work in a marginalized community, there's 20 other people also doing amazing work and they all deserve the spotlight. And so I think that, it's on all of us to like build that community and also like celebrate many authors in as many ways as we can, for sure.
Yeah, that is, especially there's often a lot of people who've been working in that community. You know what I mean? Who like I've had like 5 books out and, it's just so great to have that moment where they get that recognition.
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
So I was fascinated by how carefully and fully built your world felt, particularly the aliens. I think that's something that like, especially when I think about like my ideal space opera, I really wanted, I wanted that big alien world. So how do you approach your world building? Where did you start? Where did Yato come from?
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of just like, I always say that like world building kind of goes in stages. Like there's kind of like, and I'm sure I would love to hear you talk about world building as well, but world building goes in stages for me, like where it's like, before I can write anything, I need to know enough about the world that I can kind of move around in it. And then as I'm going, I'm kind of adding rooms to the house kind of as I'm like, oh, we need to go here. So I need to build this room so that we can go here. And like, and then with the aliens and this, and then you keep adding, and as you revise, you're adding more and more because you're like, okay, this part feels kind of thin and I got to keep bulk it up. But I feel like with the aliens in this book, I was really trying to kind of come up with aliens that I hadn't seen before and that seemed interesting to me, that were kind of new and fresh and different, which is often like, I feel like when you're writing genre stuff, like we've all seen everything before, like, we've all seen fairy stories before. And so when you did the Evoke of the Air trilogy, you found ways to like make the fairy story like really fresh and different and new and just, and I feel like that's part of the challenge, is always just like finding the new version of a thing that you've seen before and kind of like putting the old version out of your mind, but also just being like coming up with something that's like got its own internal logic. Mm-hmm. And so like, I really tried to think of aliens who felt like they were people we could hang out with, but were still just like super different and recognizably really different, and had their own cultures that were really complicated and kind of had layers to it. And so I just kept adding and adding. And like, with Yato, I tried to come up with a character who, was like a really supportive, nurturing character, but also had like their own kind of like backstory that was like, that they had been through some stuff before the book starts. I feel like that always is a way that gets me into any character. And it actually, that stuff becomes more important in the second book in terms of Yato's like past as like a movie star and stuff. It's just a whole complicated thing. I like characters who have like a really complicated past. And I think that that's always part of how you can keep a character interesting. They have more future if they have more past, kind of. I don't know.
So one of the things science fiction allows for, right, is to imagine a future that's better in some ways than now. Sure, they're being hunted by an evil organization, but that doesn't mean it's all bad. And so, and I think that there are some things that this world, I wonder if you wish we had in this one.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, there's so much in this world. Like I definitely I unapologetically set out to write something that was kind of escapist and like wish fulfillment-y, because that was kind of what I wanted and what I wished I'd had when I was a teenager, was like that kind of particular escapism with like queer people and like being there for each other and like that level of wish fulfillment. And I was like, especially, I started working on this in like 2016, but I was really working on it a lot from 2017 onwards. Like I really that was when I really was like, okay, I'm going to actually try to figure out how to write this thing. And, writing it during that era, from starting like sometime in 2017, I felt like we all needed a lot of comfort and a lot of wish fulfillment and a lot of like, just get me out of here kind of. And so there was a lot of stuff in this book where like the pronoun thing for sure, the thing where like you cannot misgender someone in this world. Like it's impossible to misgender someone. You are always going to get someone's pronouns right because the universal translator that we're using will not allow you to get their pronouns wrong. And I had a lot more fun with that in the second book, actually, with people like kind of hacking that in different ways. But also, the thing that I decided that, and actually somebody pointed out that I kind of messed up a little bit, but I tried to do the thing where like nobody touches anybody without consent. And actually somebody pointed out that the passage I just read, Yato touches Tina's foot without asking first, which I'm like going to try and get fixed in the paperback. But in general, like nobody hugs without asking first. And that's like a big thing that I was like, this is aspirational for me. The fact that we really kind of have consent as part of every interaction felt really important to me. And just a lot of stuff like that, but also just like some of the technologies that we have in the book. I was just like, oh my God, I would love to have this. Like, I would love to just visit another planet. Gosh. I feel like there's a lot of stuff like that.
Okay, speaking of consent, sort of, the characters are really kind and they're really good and they're really, really respectful. And I was wondering if it was a challenge to write about such kind and good people.
I don't know. It was kind of a relief in a way because, I was kind of working on this at the same time as The City in the Middle of the Night. At least they overlapped a lot. And The City in the Middle of the Night has a lot of people who are not very kind in it. Like there's a lot of, like one of the main characters in The City in the Middle of the Night is such a huge jerk that I feel like people are like still mad at that character. Like it's been out for like 2 years and people are still like, why didn't we get to see that character die in a fire? Like, you know who I'm talking about if you've read The City in the Middle of the Night. There's like one character in particular who everybody hates. For good reason. And like, so, you know, it was really kind of a nice, like I always try to kind of give myself a break, I guess, but when I'm doing a different project, and like, it was actually really kind of refreshing, especially in this nasty time that we've been living in since 2017, to have characters who are like really kind of, you know, supporting each other and lifting each other up. And like, you know, in addition to things like Steven Universe, I was like really influenced by Becky Chambers's books, which are just like distilled kindness. They're just like you could add water to those books and just like have an ocean of kindness kind of. And I just felt like it was like that was part of the wish fulfillment for me, was that these characters are actually going to be nice to each other and they're going to support each other, and they're going to form a family and I think a lot of that comes from Rachel too. Like I felt like if it was up to Tina, there'd be a lot more, like Tina would, with the best of intentions, would kind of create like drama and alienate people. But Rachel being there, Rachel, Tina's best friend, who was in that passage I just read, Rachel is the one who's like, we're going to all really take care of each other now. And Rachel, even though you kind of think of Rachel as the sidekick originally, she kind of ends up being the leader and is like, no, we're not going to do that. We're actually going to like be supportive and we're going to actually hold each other up. And I love how that kind of, anyway, so that was the thing that I really set out to do, but it was also kind of a relief to do in a way.
Well, if you thought we needed wish fulfillment back then, boy, we didn't even know. Right?
Yeah, human contact. It's like, what is human contact?
You're going somewhere.
What even is it? Yeah, forget leaving this planet. Can I leave my house? You know?
So I was interviewing someone last week, and she said that I was asking her about her process. She said she made a mood map and then plotted to the mood map. And it reminded me how little I know about how people tell stories and how different everyone's approach is. And so I thought I would love to hear how you approach puzzling through a book, where you start, what hangs you up.
Yeah, I mean, every book is different, obviously. I'm sure you know, like at least as much as I do. Every book is different. You always have
to write a book. I don't know how to write.
I don't know how to write to save my life either, which is an ongoing challenge. But, you know, I was just like, every book is its own challenge. And, you know, with this book, with the YA, I definitely tried to do more kind of outlining, and I sold it to Tor Teen with a very detailed outline of all 3 books and like a 50-page document about all the different aliens and all the different worlds and stuff, just so that they knew that I wasn't, you know, just pulling the stuff out of nowhere, that I actually had something. But, you know, I mean, a lot of it for me is trying to find those happy accidents, trying to like kind of find the moments that are going to like really spark something with the characters. And in the case of Victories Greater Than Death, I did something similar to what I did with All the Birds in the Sky, which is that I just was like, okay, these teenagers are on a spaceship now. I'm going to just make a Word document that's like 10,000 words of these kids hanging out on a spaceship. And maybe like 2,000 words of that will be in the book. But I want to see them hanging out a lot. And I want to see them kind of like just having fun and exploring, being on the spaceship, and see their relationships forming. And, you know, and I just was like, okay, they go to a ship and they explore, and there's an adventure. And that was how I got that scene that comes about halfway through the book. Very minor spoiler. I mean, it's a bit of a spoiler, but I don't think it's going to ruin you for the book. That scene halfway through the book where Tina kills someone for the first time, and that was not something that was in my outline. It was something that I was just like, oh, and then they go on an adventure. Oh, and she has to kill someone. And then it became a huge big deal because of how Tina reacts to doing that. And it changed the second half of the book. And it was like something that completely, like in some ways, throughout the outline I'd written, because I was like, oh, okay, this has to mean something. Actually, this has to be like a turning point. And it was like, you know, happy accidents like that are kind of what I try to find when I'm writing. But you also want the plot to make sense somewhat in the end, if you can. I don't know. So it's a little bit of both. I try to leave myself room to like just stumble around and find stuff that lines around.
So do you make an outline and then you actually go and sort of do something sort of over here that's going to destroy your outline? Look, no judgment. I've never followed an outline I've ever made.
Yeah, I mean, my outlines are always like, for every book before Victories Greater Than Death, there really wasn't an outline. And what I do that most people think is weird is I'll have the second or third draft and then I'll outline that, because I'll be like, okay, I've written a book. I don't know what it is yet. So I'm going to outline it now that I've written it and just be like, what are the major points? What are the major things that happen in the book? Are they happening in the right order? Is each one of them taking up the amount of space I want them to take up? Is there stuff missing in between these two things that are happening? So I'll do that after I have a really good draft. But for the YA, I tried outlining, and I think I think the third book of the trilogy, I'm actually going to maybe stick to my outline a little bit more. That's the hope. I'm in the middle of writing it now, and I'm actually following the outline. Oh my gosh. It's like when I was like 8 and I finally learned to color inside the lines, which was, one of the many things that my learning disability made just impossible when I was a kid, was like coloring inside the lines. And then when I finally did it, I was like, I'm a wizard. I can color inside the lines. I don't know.
I think the third books are sometimes like, at least you've eliminated a bunch of choices, right?
Right.
Books, it's just like, I could do anything. I could change all of these people's names and personalities and the whole magic system. So I do think like when the third book's like, you're breaking it. Your choices are narrowing.
Yeah. And like, I feel like, fingers crossed, I feel like when you're writing a first book, when you're writing a single book, like a one and done, you get to a certain point where the plot's been going uphill. You're building, and then you just kind of go downhill. And I'm hoping, I feel like thus far, the third book of my trilogy is that, but it's a whole book of that, because so many things that I set up in the first and second books are now paying off, and it's just like dominoes falling. So thus far, it's kind of a downhill sprint, the entire book, which I'm super enjoying. It's actually a lot of fun.
So I want to talk about love. So romance is a big part of YA, and it's often kind of idealized. And I think there are absolute components of Tina's relationship that are wish fulfillment-y. And there's also things that I found subversively realistic. And I was curious how you approached love for these kids and whether you thought about it in terms of sort of YA.
I definitely thought of it in terms of YA. You can kind of see the vestigial kind of little bones of, I was going to try to have a love triangle between Tina, Elsa, and this other character, Riohan. And now basically that's been reduced to, she thinks Riohan is hot when she first meets him. And that's the entire arc of her relationship with Riohan. I mean, and then later he kind of teaches her more about the culture that her previous self came from. But yeah, I mean, the thing with Tina and Elsa was like, I wanted it to be like that classic thing that isn't a lot of YA, where you kind of butt heads at first and you kind of like don't really like each other at first. And much like, Prince Cardan and Jude for like kind of the first 2.5 books of their, not giving anything away, but
yes, he's terrible. He's terrible.
He's terrible. She's a little bit of an arrogant, I mean, she's not perfect. Jude is not perfect. I'm just going to say she makes some choices that are like some choices. I don't know.
She's a murderer. Sure.
She's a murderer. She murders one of his friends like pretty early on. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So, don't want to go down that road. But anyway, so basically I wanted Tina and Elsa to be butting heads. But, the thing that I had to really struggle with was, especially if I kind of wanted them to get together in the first book because I'm a sappy dork. And like, how quickly should they get together? How obnoxious should they be to each other? To where we can and with Elsa especially, I didn't want her to be kind of turned into too much of a jerk because she's, trans and from, Brazil and BIPOC. And I did not want to be writing her as like a jerk, even from Tina's perspective. I wanted her to have a very clearly understandable perspective that is valid and that we can accept right away. So I wanted both of them to be lovable characters who just get off on the wrong foot, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so, I love obviously I love romances that take an unconventional turn. All the Birds in the Sky was that. A lot of my short fiction is that. I love romances that kind of swerve. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that where I really found their romance is that, in a way, the romance really started to click for me when Elsa is so outraged about the horrible things that the bad guy in the book is doing, that even though she doesn't 100% agree with Tina about like how they're going about fighting the bad guy, she becomes super passionate about, we got to take this guy down. And like, I felt like that was like her passion. I like people, I feel like people who are passionate about stuff separately, it's easier for me to imagine them being passionate together, if that makes sense. So I feel like, I don't know, I like idealists. I like idealists who get together.
Okay, so I'm curious, or totally separate from book question. I feel like during the pandemic, many people got into weird things. Some people learned to bake bread. You know, some people got into physical planners like me and weird makeup videos on YouTube. And I'm curious if you took up a weird, like if a weird fascination took hold of you during the pandemic, or if you just used the time to work.
You know, I definitely changed my writing habits during the pandemic. And, you know, I started doing more like, because I just was stuck at home all the time. And like sitting at my desk at home writing all the time was just, it was hard to sustain, like without being able to go to a cafe or be able to like be in a different location. So I started writing more with text to speech on my phone, like just talking into my phone, like, and then I could mine that later for words that I could put on the page. And also going to bed at night with like a glass of whiskey and a blank notebook and just scribbling in a blank notebook at night. So I could just break up the writing routine a little bit. I got a cat. That's right. I was going to say I didn't get a weird habit, but I got a cat. My cat is the most adorable little rascal ever. His name is Marcus Aurelius Vespasian. No, Marcus Aurelius Sassafras Vespasian IV. Dr. Sassy. And if you look at my Instagram, he's basically the star of my Instagram. He's been just, he's gotten into Ayn Rand recently, which is a little worrying. But
not okay.
Yeah, no, he's really into Ayn Rand. I'm hoping I can like get him a little bit more into like, I don't know, Nozick or not Nozick, Rawls, a little bit of John Rawls.
He's going to start giving you weird lectures.
Watch my Instagram. He's giving me weird lectures already. It's really bad.
There's a lot of requests for the cat now. I don't know if someone wants to bring you your cat.
Oh my God. I'm unfortunately at Annalise's house, so I could show you
no local
my cat. If you go to my Instagram, my Instagram is basically nothing but my cat. Dr. Sassy is a very good cat. Alyssa is correct.
Catless shrugged.
Catless shrugged, yes. Catless shrugged.
Okay, so final question before we take questions from everybody is just, you say you are through the second book and working on the third now? Is this accurate? When will you read the second book? What can you tell us about it? What kind of secrets can you reveal?
So I don't know if we have a pub date for the second book yet. I handed in a revised version to my editor at the end of March. Like she had already, Miriam, my editor, had already seen it once and then was like, gave me her notes. And so I went back and revised it and handed, she was like, can you get it back to me in March? And so of course I was like, March 31st? That's March. So I handed it in at the end of March. And so basically, without giving too much away, the second book answers all the questions from the first book, like everything that the first book leaves hanging in terms of like, what is this thing that we find out about, this like threat that we find out about, what's the queen like, what's it like basically the second book reveals all of that stuff and kind of really builds out the world in a lot of ways. Like we get to actually see the queen and the palace and like how the politics of the galaxy a lot more. We get to visit Yato's home planet. We get to find out like how maybe Yato's time as a movie star was really not a good thing at all. It was really not, turns out Yato's movies have been used for some bad stuff, kind of. And it's, so we get kind of that. And the second book kind of really ratchets up the stakes, hopefully. I mean, I think it does. And kind of just like deepens a lot of the world building and stuff. And then the third book, like I said, is just like, I've set up all the dominoes. We just knock them over. And like the second book sets up some more questions that the third book answers, I think, pretty quickly. By like halfway through the third book, we just know what's going on and we're fixing it kind of, or we're dealing with it. But it's, I don't know. It's the second book is, middle volumes are always kind of a tricky thing, I think, because you have to kind of like, you have to bridge. I don't know.
I love middle books. I have a weird love of middle books. I know I'm the only person because basically, first book setup, third book you have to pay out. Second book, you can just torture people the entire time. Like it's just a book of messing with them.
God. Like Jude being stuck in like the under the ocean where they God, that was like harrowing.
People.
Oh my God, that was hard. That part was hard to get through. It was so intense. But anyway, so yeah, no, third books, middle books. I don't know. For me, like I said, the third book so far is just like kind of going down the hill. And not in a everything's going like my not in the story's going downhill, but the pace is going downhill. It's like the downhill sprint.
That acceleration, right? That's why at the end of every book, I think I can write another book fast, but I can't.
Man, that thing where you go from like, you know, a finished book that you're just like kind of finally checking the last like punctuation on, and everything is like pristine and lovely, and like there's like flower arrangements and like, you know, just candles and doves flying around, and then you get to you start a brand new book and you're just like, you have like piles of clay and like you're just like, where's the flower arrangements? Where'd the doves go? Why are there no candles? It's just like a bunch of crap. What the hell? Ugh, it's the worst.
Do you have anything else you want to tell us about? Do you have anything else you're working on that you would like to do?
Well, I have 2 more books coming out this year. In August, we're publishing Never Say You Can't Survive, which is my collection of essays on how to survive hard times. And those were serialized online last year at Tor.com. And now I've revised them and polished them, and they're so much better and tighter and stronger. And they're coming out as a book in August. And then in November, I have a short story collection called Even Greater Mistakes coming out. So, you know,
great title.
I have an adult novel that I'm really hoping I can get to my agent soon, because he's been like kind of tapping his foot. But there's an adult novel that I kind of wrote in bed while drinking whiskey last year. So
yeah, the thing that you got into during the pandemic was writing. You just wrote a bunch of books. The rest of us learned
like having a life. I don't know who has a life. Whatever. Anna Lee bakes a lot of amazing bread and amazing like shrugs, or I don't know, grunts and shrugs and just amazing things. Buckles.
Yeah. All right. So questions from all y'all. I think maybe someone will return.
Yes.
Yes.
Yay. I'm waiting for my video to come back. Yes. Hello.
Hey, welcome back.
Yes, thank you. That was a great conversation. Thank you so much. I did notice that Macmillan put in the expected date of your second book's release, which was year 20,222. I think they mean 2022.
That gives me a long lead time for the third book, because it only has to come out 20,000.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out if it was a reference to your, to your future, or or to your setting. But I thought that was pretty funny. So I just wanted to clarify. It's 2022 within the next year. Hopefully. And then I did see someone didn't put it in the question box, but I was also curious about the Victories Greater Than Death book behind you. Is that a different edition, or?
You can hold it up.
Yeah. So this was the original cover that we were going to do.
Oh, it's the inside.
And now it's the inside. Yeah. So we were going to do this as like, this was going to be the original cover. And then, the decision was made that we were better off with like, this purpley cover, which they're both beautiful. Like I love both of these covers. So I was like, well, we're good. Either way, it's amazing. And so they turned the original cover into like end papers in the hardcover, which is just like, I've never seen anything so gorgeous in my entire life. Like it's so amazingly beautiful. And I'm just like, I just can't believe that they did that, because it's 2 beautiful pieces of artwork. I'm just like, dang.
It's gorgeous. Well, thanks for showing us that, and Holly for showing us the inside of the book. Is beautiful. All right, to the audience questions. So the first one that got the highest vote is from an anonymous person. They said, I recently listened to the OOAC podcast about fight scenes, and I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about writing fight scenes / space battles in this book and the role they play in telling a story or illuminating characters.
That's an amazing question. Yeah, and like I already mentioned about how like Tina has to kill someone, and that's like it's a huge turning point in the book. She's really kind of messed up by doing that. It's like something that she sort of thinks, oh yeah, I'm gonna be a hero, and part of what you do is you go around shooting people, and like that's just, and then it turns out that that's actually not as easy, and so that's actually something that's like a huge thing. And like the fact that Tina does have all these combat skills because she's the clone of this alien hero, and she's inherited all of the skills and not memories, but skills and knowledge of this alien hero. And so she's just like, she's able to go out and kick a lot of ass, but is that her? Like, is that who she wants to be? And she starts to kind of question that, which is something that I always want to, like, when I write about violence, I want to kind of think about violence in a more kind of complicated way than just like, like I love action movies. I love like James Bond movies and like John Wick and everything. But I also think that it's really good, especially in the world we're living in right now, where we have like mass shootings all the time, and like writing for teens who, are having to worry about like mass shootings in high schools, not to bring up a really unpleasant topic. I think it's really good to think about like the, how violence actually, what the cost of violence to you and to everybody else. I had a lot of fun writing some of those. Like one of my favorite scenes in the book is when Tina is like sparring with Lizix, who's this kind of mean alien who kind of hates Tina's guts and is taking the opportunity to kind of just wail on her. And that was really fun because it was just like, I don't know. It was a really fun kind of mean moment where Tina's kind of getting her ass kicked. And I enjoyed that a lot. So for the space battles, I actually asked on Twitter a couple of years ago, like, what are your favorite space battles? What do you like in a space battle? I kind of got into it with people. And what I love in a space battle is when it's very specific. I think like the more specific you can be about like the kind of strategy and like the advantages of our position and their position and how we can navigate this situation versus like the kind of the failure mode is just like, it's just kind of vague and like blurry, and you can't really like, it just feels like a generic space battle versus like, okay, so they're closer to the planet, so they have the advantage of this with the planet's gravity, but they have to work harder to escape the gravity well. But if we shoot at them, we might hit the planet. So, stuff like that, trying to make it as specific as possible. And I ran it past some military SF fans and some like space. I read a ton of like articles about space battles, but I really wanted them to be very specific and very like, this is a uniquely challenging situation rather than just like every space battle feels kind of the same, if that makes any sense. And I wanted to have I wanted to have moments that were like kind of hell yeah moments, like where you have like in Galaxy Quest where he's like, we're dragging mines, and like in Wrath of Khan, the sort of two-dimensional combat versus three-dimensional combat in Wrath of Khan. I wanted to have moments that were like on that level of like clever stuff that actually made sense and didn't feel like I just kind of made it up as I went along. So there was a lot of like figuring out the rules of space battles and trying to make them as like believable and like interesting and like unique as I could.
Very good. And that wonderful question was from Lisa. Sorry, Lisa, I didn't see you listed there. That was my fault. The next one that has the most votes, if I hover over the icon, it tells me the name. I'm learning as we go. This one is from Emma. What's your favorite middle books? So I'm guessing this is a reference to like the second book in a series. So what do you have a second book or middle book?
Wow. Well, I apologize. This is not me being an ass kisser, but I'm going to say The Wicked King because that's the most recent middle book I've read. And it's also just like the book where I was like, because I was in the middle of doing edits on my second book in my trilogy. And as I was reading The Wicked King, and I was like, this is setting a standard this is raising the bar way too high. Stop it. Stop raising the bar so high. So I'm going to say The Wicked King, but also, I feel like the second book of the Kushiel trilogy by Jacqueline Carey just does such a good job of like taking all of the ideas of the first book and kind of taking them in a bunch of new directions, and kind of like, it avoids that thing of like doing the same plot a second time, which is often what you get with that kind of, unlike certain other trilogies, which I won't name, where the second book feels like just a retread of the first book. But I felt like the second, which I can't remember, it's Kushiel's Dart, Kushiel's, somebody has this book somewhere. But anyway.
I don't actually have that one. Or maybe it's Kushiel's Chosen.
I don't know. Anyway, it's all Kushiel's something, but Kushiel's second book is just like, Amazon. I remember being like, okay, this is actually like, this is deepening and broadening and kind of adding to the themes rather than just being like more of the same, which I always think more of the same is like the failure mode.
Yeah, I think
Holly, do you have a favorite?
I mean, I'm not really. So I'm gonna sort of sidestep this because my brain is not. The minute I leave this crowdcast, I will remember all the middle books I want to talk about. But what I'm thinking about is when I was a kid, I remember reading Interview with the Vampire and then The Vampire Lestat, and the fact that it changed the story, like the idea that in the first book, there's a guy, he tells you a story. In the second book, there's another guy, he tells you a story, and his story means that one of them is right and one of them is wrong. And it means that you thought you understood certain things and you come to realize you didn't understand them. And to me, that is like the greatest possible joy of a second book, is the second book that in some way undermines your understanding of the first book.
That's really cool. I love that. That's really cool.
I'm not sure I've ever done it, but it's my ideal.
Great answers. All right. The next one is actually from our friends at Macmillan, but people have voted it up. So more than one person wants to know. What are your favorite kinds of books to read right now?
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading a lot of YA recently, obviously, because I'm trying to just keep the YA kind of voice in my head. And I've been really enjoying, I loved Bethany C. Morrow's A Song Below Water. I just read The Stars and the Blacklist Between Them by Junauda Petrus. I love both. I read Maggie Tokita Hall's The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, and I was lucky enough to read an early version of the sequel, which is so amazing. As you can tell, I love escapist books. I love books that are about kind of, finding yourself, but also like finding like a bigger world than you knew existed. And I love books that kind of open out like that. I'm trying to think of other, I've just been reading a lot of Squirrel Girl, graphic novels, because that's the kind of like happy, fun, like nurturing escapist story that I have been like really craving lately. And I just love how Squirrel Girl really is about like a group of friends who just like solve problems mostly by being smart and nice. I feel like that's my jam right now.
Yeah. See, I came into the whole pandemic with Murderbot, which I hadn't read any of, and was like read them straight through and then got the novel like right after and was so happy. I had no idea, but I got super, super into those. I'm trying to see what else I have here. I've been reading a lot of books about how to pickpocket, how to commit crimes, and it's for research, but I've been really enjoying it. And Murdery Ladies, Lady Criminals. I feel like I have a good book called Confident Women about, con artist ladies.
Nice.
Like nonfiction?
Yeah.
Very nice. I'll see that. I just finished Gideon of the Ninth. So
yeah,
I'm on that also.
Good.
Strong Women. So I'm gonna start the second one tonight. So I'll let you know if that one has a good second book to it.
Talking about fight scenes, Gideon the Ninth has just the best fight scenes. Like the fight scenes in that book are so well done. They're just so good.
Yeah. I'm listening to the audio, so I always visualize things better when reading, but the audio is just amazing, and I love it. So I'm looking forward to the second book. So if you guys like all those strong women fighting, add that to your TBR. All right, we've got some other great questions here. Okay, so this is for Charlie Jane. If it's not a spoiler, could you say something about why you've used the present tense?
Oh yeah. Okay. So, I mean, part of that is like, I did a lot of like noodling about POV intents and stuff when I started to write this trilogy. And there was definitely like, have some early drafts where it's third person, where it's past tense, where it's like, I didn't try second person or future tense, but I tried different combinations of tense and POV. And and I looked at like a ton of YA books. Like I just spread out like a ton of YA books on the floor around me, including things like Hunger Games and some of the other big YA books that had come out when I started working on this, and just trying to like analyze how they use POV intents. And I was really thinking about like, and what I love about first person present is that it's the most immediate. Like I felt like when I tried writing first person past tense, it was like someone telling you a story about something that happens to them in the past. And that they're fine, but also it's got this ironic distance of like, oh, I was so scared. Oh gosh, I thought I might die. And it's like, oh, I was really worried. And like, it just sounds kind of like, okay, whatever, dude, you're fine. And like actually third person past tense feels more immediate and like kind of emotional to me than first person past tense, because it's like he was so scared he thought he might die. You're like, okay, narrator, you got me. If there's a narrator that's like kind of ramping up your tension. But I feel like first person, where it's like I am currently in a moment where I feel like I'm gonna die, my heart is beating, my chest is like pounding, and like I'm just like I can hear the blood singing in my ears or whatever, stuff like that. I feel like if it's like the moment you're in the moment, then it's like actually kind of exciting. And I feel like that's a reason why a lot of YA does that, is like the first person present tense, because it is just like the most immediate kind of voice. And I felt like and I love a voicey narrator. And I felt like part of how I was able to get into this book was finally finding like Tina's kind of like level of snark, but also kind of kindness and like thoughtfulness, and like kind of her sense of humor, but also her just like yearning, and just like tracking that like in the moment. Like it felt like having it be present tense made it easier to kind of just like be in that at any given time, and just help me to find the voice, I think.
It's good. It's a good answer. All right, we have another one that I can open up to both of you. And this is from a fellow Hannah. What techniques do you use to tackle writer's block?
I mean, I'm going to just say I don't think writer's block is really a thing that exists. I think that, I once wrote a thing about how basically writer's block is like 100 different things that people lump together into this one thing. And, there are different, it's really about troubleshooting. It's really about like, why am I stuck? Sometimes you're stuck because you're writing a part that you're bored with, and you should just jump ahead and write a different part of the book. Sometimes you're stuck because you actually don't believe in what you're writing, but you've convinced yourself you believe in it. Like that happens to me a lot, where I'm like, oh, this makes total sense. Oh yeah, this character would really do this. And like, I'm just trying to like make it work when I should be listening to the voice inside me that's like, no, this is not working. This character would not do this, or this doesn't make sense. I feel like often I just need to take a break and take a long walk, read something that I really love, read something that I wrote. Like it sounds egotistical, but sometimes if you read something you wrote that you're happy with from like 3 years ago, you just kind of like get back into your own head as a writer in a weird way, and you kind of get your own voice back in your head. But I feel like a lot of it is just like finding the thing that you're curious about that you want to write. And maybe you have to put something on the back burner and write something else for a little while, but there's a million reasons you get stuck. And I did write about this in part of that tour series that's coming out in a book in August. Holly, I would love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, I think that people have very strong feelings about the term writer's block. And, but I absolutely agree that it is such a big term that what you have, like the first thing you have to do is figure out like what's going on, because, sometimes it's that you're just in an emotional place. I mean, I know a lot of people this past year couldn't write, they couldn't read, they couldn't do any of the stuff that they could do before. And there was no way through that. That was just, okay, you're going to have to give yourself a break. You're too stressed, and it's just not possible to concentrate right now in the same way. I can tell you that I wrote a book, and then post-election, I looked at what I wrote and I was like, who wrote this book? This book is not okay. Like someone needs to go back and fix this book really fast,
Oh,
which I believe that I somewhat did. But so I did write a book, but and then I think, yeah, a lot of times I'm stuck because I came to a crossroads and I can't make a decision, or I made the wrong decision and I don't want to admit it. Like I have to cut 30,000 words out of the book, but I'm not ready to do that. So I'm just going to sit here for a minute. Or like I don't know enough and I need to go talk to my friends and say, hey guys, can you take a look at this? Can you what do I do next? What could these people do? How can I get out of this? I know some people have complicated feelings about talking through their stories because I think we fetishize originality when we talk about fiction. And I think that people think, oh, if you talk about it with your friends, it won't be your story. But I can promise you it will be your story because this is what's going to happen. You're going to sit there and they're going to say, what about this? And you're going to be like, no. How do you know the answer is no? But you do. And they're going to say, what about this? And you're going to say no. And then they're going to say, what about this? And you're like, well, that gives me an idea that's kind of like that, but different. And that's the answer. And you wouldn't possibly know that if the story didn't live in some kind of supernatural way up here that you can access. So I always thought, if you're stuck, talk to your friends.
yeah, that's all just such great advice. And I love, especially the thing about like you took a wrong turn 30,000 words ago and you just need to throw out those 30,000 words. That happens a lot. And sometimes you can just be like, I'm going to pretend I wrote the thing I should have written and just keep going forward. But at some point I'm going to have to go back and put something to replace those 30,000 words. But I'm not going to do that yet because I want to keep moving forward. One more thing that I do a lot that I'm kind of compulsive about is I brainstorm. I just brainstorm while I'm writing. So if I'm like kind of at a point where I'm like, I don't know what happens next, or I'm kind of confused or just stuck, I will sit and write like a letter to myself basically, or like ask myself a bunch of questions, like just to myself, and be like, what is this story? What's it about? Why am I writing it? What does this mean to me? Why did I want to do this thing in the first place? The themes that I see coming out of these conversations and these things that the characters are doing, and how can I kind of get deeper into those themes? What would be the most interesting thing that would happen next? Oftentimes I get stuck. So this is getting to be a long answer and I apologize, but oftentimes I get stuck because I either think that the characters know something that they don't know, or I think that they don't know something that they do know, or I don't have it clear in my head what they know at this particular moment. And so I have them, they know what I know, they know what the author knows, which is never the case. Either they know more than I do, or they know less, or they know things differently. And oftentimes if I can just like get in my head, what do they know? Then I can write them what they're going to do next, because like that's what the information that they have is what they're going to use to make their next decision.
Yeah, it's great advice. Thank you. We do have a few more questions, and hopefully we can get to all of them, but there's a few that are still voted up. So this next one is from Emily, and it's a long one, so if I have to repeat it, let me know. But I love this book's tackling of the old question in Star Trek about why there are so many humanoid species. Without spoiling anything you don't want to spoil, it would be great to hear how you went about considering the question and how it intersects with our own very horrible history on this planet.
Oh my God, I love that question. Thank you so much. Everybody in the room here is so excited. First of all, fuck Eric Van Daniken. Am I allowed to swear? So basically there's this whole thing that like this guy came up with, that like ancient aliens came to Earth and like, shaped us or gave us their DNA or whatever, and that we're actually descended from ancient aliens. And it leads to a lot of like really creepy stuff. And often it's about how like ancient aliens built the pyramids, or white people are like descended from these superior aliens or something. And like, you see it in the movie Prometheus. There's actually an episode of TNG where they claim that ancient aliens seeded the galaxy with their DNA. So backing up slightly, sorry, I got into it the wrong way. Oftentimes in science fiction, you have aliens who are humanoid, who have like the same basic shape as us, like the 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. And the main explanation for that is that we got the DNA from like these ancient aliens, like they spread their DNA around the galaxy, which, I don't know. There's a lot of issues with that, I think. And then the other explanation is convergent evolution, and basically that like this shape, this kind of like humanoid shape, is so superior and so advantageous that it will just naturally rise up on all these other planets, and that it'll just naturally, those will be the creatures that will get out into the galaxy because we're so good. We have hands and we're so good at like doing things because we have bilateral symmetry. Like our left side and our right side are more or less the same, except for obviously the organs and stuff, but whatever. Anyway, and I was like, what if there's a third explanation? And the third explanation I came up with, without getting too deep into spoiler territory, is that there was a eugenics project, that there were aliens a long time ago who mounted a huge eugenics project to basically selectively breed humanoids on different planets and to kind of crush or punish or kind of sabotage any creature that seemed to be intelligent that wasn't humanoid. And that was like this kind of creepy thing that, like, I'm a real sucker, especially lately, for stories where there's like an ancient crime that we have to figure out what to do about, because I feel like that's kind of life. Like, there are things that, horrible things that happened a long time before any of us that were born, that we are still, you know, kind of benefiting from or living with the consequences of. And we have to figure out how to grapple with that history. And so I feel like that's the more interesting answer to that kind of question of why are there, you know, humanoids everywhere. And you'll notice that when Star Trek TNG had that one episode where they revealed that the Klingons and the Romulans and, you know, the Ferengi and whoever else all were genetically related to humans, that was never mentioned again because it was like a story dead end. It was like a thing that just did not lead to anything interesting. It was like a weird reveal that they were just swept under the rug immediately afterwards. So I love to kind of spout off about that. So please stop me now, but I could talk about that for another hour.
Be a podcast episode if you haven't done
Yeah,
it already.
maybe we could do a Varric von Daniken podcast or an Ancient Aliens podcast episode.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I hate that trope.
All right, let's see if we can get through at least one more question. This one is kind of fun and silly. It's from Janelle.
Oh,
How would it go if Tina suddenly found herself in the Great British Bake Off?
oh my gosh. You know, I think that if Tina found herself in the Great British Bake Off, she would probably be like super confident at first, and she'd just be like, oh, I can do this. I'm like, you know, the galaxy's savior, and I've got like all the knowledge of this like galactic hero. And then like we would just cut immediately to like half an hour later when she's covered in flour and butter and like begging like Damini and Elsa and Rachel and her other friends to come rescue her from the mess she's created, that's a little unfair to Tina. But, you know, I feel like that is Tina a little bit, that she sometimes like strides into situations, thinking she's going to handle it and then doesn't quite handle it. But, you know, I mean, Tina also, to be fair, Tina was raised by a mom who very much believed in like getting the pre-made cake mix. So she might just like sneak some pre-made cake mix into the British Bake Off, and then just like while everybody's distracted, like set off an explosion over here, and while everybody's distracted, just like use the store-bought pre-made cake mix and like be like, look what I made it from scratch. Like that's probably what Tina would do, because she's tricky. She's good at subterfuge.
Strategist.
Yeah. Holly, can you imagine any of your characters in the Great British Bake Off?
Oh my God.
I mean, I don't know that they have any real skills that apply.
They wouldn't make it.
I mean, I can imagine them in it, not and going anywhere good.
That's funny. That's one of the things.
Take their cake.
Yeah, that's one of the things I picked up during quarantine was the Great British Bake Off. Not baking, but the show itself. Let's see. I'm looking at these last questions, and we might be able to do like a quick lightning round, get all these questions in, because we are at an hour mark, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to be a rebel. I'm going to do it anyway. Let's go back up. This one, it was recently voted up, so people are interested in this one. Do you have a process? And this is from Rhea, or Ray. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Do you have a process or ritual for saying goodbye to your characters when you finish a book or series? It's a great question. So do either of you have something special you do?
I do not, although I've noticed that like I have a real tendency, like when I finish a novel, to immediately write a short story, or not immediately, but like a few months later, write a short story, kind of wrapping up either loose ends about the characters or just like giving them one last whirl. And I feel like, I'm just always excited to move on to the next thing. I'm a little bit of a serial, or not even a serial monogamist, because I can often be working on 2 books at the same time. But I'm a little bit of a like, this was super fun, see you later kind of, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't have a ritual, but I definitely, I always think that the next thing will be the book that will be really easy to write. And then I know everything about, like, there's no book better than the book I'm not writing now, but we'll write as soon as I'm done with this one. And then, man, once I'm in that one, I got a real fondness for those people I used to know.
Oh,
so I'm always convinced I'll come back. And sometimes I do, maybe. But, like, I don't want to say goodbye because who knows? We could see each other again.
Well, that's a great segue into this next question from Bix, and it is for Charlie Jane. It's asking, do you think you will ever revisit the characters from the City in the Middle of the Night? I love them so much.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Bix. And yay, I'm so glad you were able to be here because I know you had another event going on this evening. So I did write a short story. If y'all haven't seen it, there's a short story that takes place after the City in the Middle of the Night called If You Take My Meaning. And it's free to read online if you just Google my name and If You Take My Meaning. And so there's that. That's currently all I have in mind for those characters. I sort of thought, like, if I ever did write a sequel to The City in the Middle of the Night, it would take place when Sophie, the main character of the book, is an elderly woman. So basically, she's a teenager in the book. So basically picking up like 2 or 3 generations later and seeing how things have kind of developed from there. But currently, that is on the back burner. Like, that's basically like Kool-Aid. At this point, it might happen eventually. One of these days, I might just be like, I really want to write that now, but it's not there's no immediate plan to do more of that, unfortunately.
Okay, well, there's a lot of love for it in the chat going on. And our final question is just kind of, we've chatted a little bit about it, so we'll just throw it in because it is our last one. It's from Cecilia. How many books do you think there will be in this series? Are Tina's friends going to each get their own book?
So currently it is a trilogy. It's a trilogy. And I've definitely thought about, like, because I have so much stuff that I've written, like so much stuff that I've come up with, like world building wise. And there's just so much stuff that I'm like, I wish I could explore this thing, and I don't know if I'll ever get to this thing. I might write some novellas that are kind of side questy things. Like, I feel like there's some stuff that, like, I'm really thinking about hopefully maybe trying to write a novella that takes place between the first and second books, because there's some stuff, like the second book picks up a while later, and there's some stuff that I would love to kind of fill in. And I know that happens in YA sometimes, like people will write novellas that take place kind of in between or are side quests. But also, once the trilogy is done, I have an idea for a 4th book that would maybe be a standalone. I haven't even talked to Miriam really about this yet. I mean, we kind of talked very vaguely about it. I know Miriam's in the chat, so tell me say something in the chat if I should shut up now, Miriam. But I have an idea for a 4th book that would basically be people who were stuck on Earth, like people who were back on Earth while all the events because, spoiler alert, we never really make it back to Earth in the trilogy except for possibly at the end of the 3rd book. We'll see what happens. But a teenager who's on Earth during this trilogy and kind of dealing with all the stuff that has happened to Earth during this trilogy, because I feel like I'm kind of tracking that in my head, and I feel like, I don't know, I would love to see, anyway, I have a lot of ideas for a 4th book, but really depends on the trilogy and whether people want a 4th book after they've read. They may be like, no more, stop, get it away from us. I don't know. We'll see.
I don't think that'll happen. There'll be more, yes, more. That's usually what happens. Get ready. Well, thank you. That was our last question from the audience. Thank you so much. Thank you, Holly, for your wonderful questions. Thank you again, Charlie Jane, for picking Books Inc. as your launch day bookstore. And just a reminder to everybody who's here, if you didn't purchase a book through Eventbrite, you can do so through that buy button down there and get Victories Greater Than Death through Books Inc. And I will send in an email through Eventbrite the coupon code for things that you can use for the next week. That's 15% off both of the titles. And if you did purchase it through Eventbrite, you already got that discount. So thank you so much. And there will be a little gift with the books if you brought with the Victories Greater Than Death. So I'll be packing those up this week. I'm super
Yay! Oh my God, I'm so excited.
And if you bought yourself a book and want to gift it to somebody else, BookSync does ship nationwide and to Canada. So keep that in mind. And thank you again, everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful night, and congratulations, Charlie Jane.
Thank you so much. Oh my God. Thank you, Holly. And thank you, BookSync. This was so much fun. And I love you both and you all. And yay. And don't forget to save the galaxy.
That's right. Go save the galaxy. Thank you, everyone. Bye.